Open your Notes app right now, or your project management tool, or just look at the one task sitting at the top of your to-do list today. Not something you are confused about. Not something that needs more research. The thing where you have already done the planning. Already know every single step. Already have everything you need to begin. And you still have not started. Society has a very comfortable label for this. It calls you a procrastinator. It tells you that you lack discipline, that you are self-sabotaging, or that you simply do not want it badly enough. But modern neuroscience reveals something that completely dismantles that narrative. Knowing what to do and actually starting it are processed by two entirely different systems in your brain. And for high achievers specifically, the gap between those two systems is wider, deeper, and far more psychologically complex than anyone around you realizes. Today, we are exploring the exact psychology of why the most driven people alive freeze at the starting line, even when they already know the way. The action-insight gap. First, we need to understand why knowledge and action live in completely different neighborhoods of your brain. Neuroscientists call this the action-insight gap. Generating a plan, understanding a concept, and mapping out a strategy. These processes live in the prefrontal cortex, your brain's most sophisticated analytical region. But initiating action? That is governed by the basal ganglia, a far more primitive system that responds not to logic, but to habit, momentum, and emotional safety. Here is the critical problem. High achievers spend the majority of their time in the prefrontal cortex, analyzing, optimizing, strategizing. The more intelligent and analytical your mind, the wider the neurological bridge you have to cross every single time you try to move from knowing to doing. You are not frozen because you are weak. You are frozen because your brain's two most important systems are speaking entirely different languages. The stakes amplification effect. Second, the higher your standards, the higher the psychological stakes of beginning. For an average person, starting a project means starting a project. For a high achiever, starting a project means putting your identity, your competence, and your self-concept directly on the line. This ties directly to Dr. Carol Dweck's foundational research on identity-based motivation. When your sense of self is deeply intertwined with the quality of your output, the moment you begin is the moment you become vulnerable to a verdict. Not starting keeps your potential perfectly intact and permanently protected. Starting forces a result. And for a mind with sky-high internal standards, an imperfect result feels more threatening than no result at all. Your hesitation is not laziness. It is your identity running a protection protocol. Let's step away from the theory for a second. I want you to picture someone. Take a pattern that appears consistently in research on high-performing individuals. Someone who spent 3 weeks building the perfect content strategy for their business. Color-coded spreadsheet. Competitor analysis. Posting schedule mapped out to the hour. Everything prepared with surgical precision. And then, on the morning they were supposed to post the very first piece of content, they opened a new tab and started refining the strategy again. Not because the strategy was wrong, because beginning meant the experiment was real, and real experiments can fail. They weren't avoiding the work, they were avoiding the verdict, because of something psychologists call the phantom preparation loop. Third, high achievers are uniquely vulnerable to productive feeling avoidance. Researching, planning, organizing, and optimizing all feel like forward motion. They produce the neurological sensation of progress without the emotional exposure of actual execution. Psychologist Dr. Adam Grant describes this as procrastination's shadow, the tendency of high-functioning people to substitute preparation activity for starting activity because preparation carries zero risk of failure. Every hour you spend refining the plan is an hour your brain registers as responsible and diligent, while successfully avoiding the one moment that actually matters. The plan is not the problem. The plan is the escape route disguised as the solution. The activation energy threshold. Fourth, starting requires a disproportionate amount of energy for a high-capacity mind. In chemistry, activation energy is the minimum energy required to initiate a reaction. The more complex the reaction, the higher the activation energy required. Your goals are not simple reactions. They are complex, multivariable, high-stakes endeavors that your brain accurately recognizes as requiring significant cognitive and emotional fuel to ignite. A regular car starts easily in almost any conditions. A Formula One engine requires precise temperature, precise fuel mixture, and precise conditions before it fires. You are not a car that won't start. You are a high-performance engine that requires more to ignite and has been sitting in the wrong conditions. The identity decoupling problem. Finally, and most critically, high achievers struggle to separate their self-worth from their work quality. For most people, a bad first draft is just a bad first draft. For a high achiever, a bad first draft is evidence about who they are. Dr. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability consistently shows that the people with the highest standards experience the most intense resistance to beginning, because beginning is an act of radical exposure. You are not afraid of the work. You are afraid of what the work might reveal about you. And until you can psychologically separate the quality of your first attempt from the truth of your capabilities, your brain will continue choosing the safety of the starting line over the risk of the race. How to cross the gap. If you have spent your life knowing exactly what to do and watching the day end without doing it, it is time to stop blaming your discipline. You have a high-performance mind operating in the wrong ignition conditions. Here are 3 actionable ways to close the gap. The deliberate downgrade. Give yourself explicit permission to begin badly. Don't write the first chapter. Write the worst possible first chapter on purpose. Don't record the perfect video. Record a version you will never publish. Your only goal is to move your brain from the prefrontal cortex into the basal ganglia. Quality is irrelevant. Motion is everything. The decoupled first step. Separate starting from succeeding entirely. Your only task for the next 15 minutes is not to make progress. It is simply to begin and stay. No outcome attached. No quality standard applied. This removes the identity stake from the ignition moment and dramatically lowers your brain's activation energy threshold. The verdict delay agreement. Make a private agreement with yourself that no judgment, internal or external, is allowed until a predetermined checkpoint. Not after the first paragraph. Not after the first recording. After the 3rd completed attempt. You are not protecting mediocrity. You are protecting the psychological conditions your high-performance engine needs to actually fire. You do not have a discipline problem. You have an ignition problem, and now you know exactly where the gap is. The only difference between the high achiever who starts and the one who doesn't is the willingness to fire the engine badly and trust that momentum will handle the rest. If you have ever spent an entire day preparing to start something you never actually began, drop an emoji in the comments below. Tell me what you are finally going to start this week. I will be reading every single one. And if this video gave you the missing piece, My next video is the one that follows this directly. We are going deeper into, if you can't stop overthinking, this is what your brain is actually doing. Subscribe to Psychology Unseen so you don't miss it, and hit that like button on your way out.